I started my week honoring Mandela. I walked with his wife, Grasa Machel, my boss, Mr. Kofi Annan, and the Elders Organization, an organization that Mandela founded after dedicating his life to peace, after dedicating his life to his country. We walked and marched down Whitehall, demanding the attention of the press, including the BBC, demanding the attention of London, and demanding the attention of everyday person, that Mandela's long walk to freedom has not been forgotten. And even though I wasn't born at the time in which he faced this struggle, does not mean I don't understand it. And so that was Monday, this is Friday, and I've done full circle, and so it's incredibly serendipitous to finish my week, finish Black History Month, honoring the great Mandela. According to the BBC, the great and late Nelson Mandela once said, "Action without vision is only passing time. Vision without action is merely daydreaming. But vision with action can change the world." I think each of us sitting here in this room feel the weight of those words and know that truly, Mandela was an activist, a visionary, and someone who defined the very fabric of our societies. His legacy lives on through his words, or reported words, and his actions continue to impact our lives. His life, his work, and his very special words have very much had an impact on my own life. Ladies and gentlemen, when you ask me, who am I call myself a counter-extremist. I'll tell you what that means in just a moment, but first, I'd like to tell you how I got here. I'm 24, not lived that long, but I've been on a massive journey. And I think that journey has been accelerated by things like fake news and the age of Internet of Things, but it's been a meaningful journey. As a young woman, growing up in the heart of East London, daily life was a constant battle. Coming from one of the poorest boroughs in the UK and being of Brit, Bengali, Muslim heritage, well, let's just say it was not easy. I've always been reduced to a mere statistic. Time and again, I've been told, you will fail because you're the daughter of immigrants and they're not really British. You will fail because you're from East London. You will fail because you're a Muslim, and one that we constantly hear, you will fail because you're a woman. Evidently, my life choices were laid out for me, and those choices, or a lack thereof, were constrained to the virtue of my social class. Just like every other young person from East London, I was, and still am, to this day, expected to fail. So when I didn't, it came as a shock. Not much different to Mandela. It was his own skin color that saw the society in which he was born into reject him in his infancy, without making space to listen to what he might have to say in his adulthood. The formative years of my life consisted of the same thing, being told that I will amount to nothing. Society has systematically attempted to relegate me to failure. It continues to expect me to do just enough and get by, because you're a woman. Ambition, drive, and determination are constructs that only the privileged can attain. You don't dare dream, and as a woman, you don't dare demand a place at the table. Nothing frustrated me more as a young girl than being told that I lack vision. Being told that my postcode has predetermined my abilities, that my skin color has pre-established my position in this world, and that my gender has permanently put me at the back of every queue. With this drilled into you from a very early age, it's very difficult to know your place in society. It's difficult to have hope, even with inspirational heroes like Mandela. But as a young girl, feeling the heavy burden of society, I quietly contemplated these issues. I began to see beyond. I began to query. I began to form my own vision. Earlier, I told you what I do for a living. I'm a living, breathing counter-extremist. Yes, you heard me correctly. The Muslim in the room just said she's an extremist. A counter-extremist, that is. So how did I become an activist? On Thursday, 7th July 2005, I saw this very city, my special home, and my community suffer from evil. Not once, not twice, but 4 times over. Growing up, I had already felt racial and gender-based prejudice, but that day was the first day the harsh hand of Islamophobia affected me. 7/7 and the immediate aftermath of the attacks was the first time that the clarion call of extremism invaded my life. In every corner, radical voices popped up, enticing our youth to stand for violence, to perpetuate hate, and to turn their backs on British society. Fast forward to today, and this call grows louder by the second. There is a cacophony of extremist voices telling you that you are disenfranchised, you are a statistic that people will forget, and you need to respond with violence. It is the same voices from my childhood that told me I should accept failure, who are now telling me that extreme violence is my only choice as a Muslim in this world. As a member of the largest Muslim community in London, I've been uniquely affected by these voices. I've seen my community divided, neighbors turn away from one another, and felt the heavy burden of having to apologize for extremists who killed in the name of my peaceful religion, Islam. Again, not much different to what Mandela felt in a country that was divided based on skin color, based on racial fault lines. I knew then that I didn't just want to be a statistic. I knew then that the hopes and vision I was quietly harboring in my mind had to come to fruition. It was my duty to take action. I refused to become an extremist apologist, despite being told that it's my faith, my religion, and my identity that is responsible for all the problems of the world. I know exactly where my place in this society is. Nobody else should tell me otherwise. Again, it's as a counter-extremist. So all along, my calling had been realized. The quiet rebellion that had been simmering in me as a young girl had finally manifested itself. The rebellion that was living inside Mandela lives inside me. Vision becomes action. Action becomes reality. Somehow, Mandela's own struggle against an unfair, prejudicial, extreme, and racial system has thrown light on the experiences that I have faced, that I continue to face, and no doubt will face moving forward. And I feel like I've brought the mood down a little bit. I didn't just wake up one morning and think, what do I do? Right, I need to counter violent extremism. Believe me, it's not a choice you make, and it's certainly not a career path that I had envisioned. And if Mandela was here now, maybe he wouldn't have chosen his struggle. His struggle chose him, right? In a way, it's the same thing. Seeing Islamophobia, seeing racism, seeing sexism, being the person that the world's hate is being directed at, this has chosen me. Believe it or not, I actually wanted to become a doctor. Another life, maybe. But having experienced the very real, direct, and devastating impacts of terror, I've been personally compelled to act. For the sake of my faith, for the sake of my community, and for the goddamn sake of humanity, excuse my French. The choices I have made, for example, to challenge negative stereotypes, to dispel misinformation, and to work for a more cohesive community, have delivered me the title of a next-generation counter-extremist. I work with another great man, for another great man, Mr. Kofi Annan, who now chairs the Elders Organization founded by Mandela himself. So I feel it's fate calling me to him. It's fate calling me to action. Or maybe it's Mandela calling me to action. I work on the front line across global communities and boundaries to prevent extremism in young men and women. I do this by using education as a tool of inoculation and a method to resist indoctrination by extremist groups. I've developed training programs around the world to stimulate and encourage debate around issues of faith. We shouldn't shut down debate. We shouldn't shut it down because it makes us feel uncomfortable, or we shouldn't shut it down because it's not PC enough for us. But we need to build resilience within communities and strengthen the resolve of individuals to challenge and dispel extremist propaganda, just like Mandela challenged and dispelled racial propaganda. This year has been an immensely difficult one. Our country has once again suffered from evil. While July 2005 saw 4 bombs go off in London, in 2017 we have witnessed evil strike at the core of British freedom and British democracy. 4 attacks in the space of 4 months. Just 2 weeks ago, Somalia was bombed twice. Regular occurrence in Somalia, but does that mean we don't report about it? Does that mean we don't challenge the inconvenient truth that violent extremism exists, and it's as much my problem as it is yours? And even now, as we speak, the silent persecution of the Rohingya Muslim community in Burma that nobody wants to talk about, that nobody wants to say anything, that nobody wants to take action, it frustrates me. And I stand here feeling really, really emotional because there's all these isms that we throw about. But the one that we don't listen to is the fact that peaceism is something that we should be striving for. So let us not allow the Rohingya to be a silent minority. Let us not talk about people after they have passed. Let us not talk about genocides that have happened or ethnic cleansings that have happened. Let's do something right now. And so these events have exemplified that our ongoing peace will only narrowly be sustained if we just sit here merely thinking or daydreaming. And so, with all of that floating around in my head, and all this energy as a 24-year-old, what do? I rebel, of course. I launched the first ever Countering Violent Extremism roadshow, touring schools and colleges and communities across the entire country, exposing the very flaws and inconvenient truths that I've just talked about, exposing the facts that you and I are as much at risk from terror than people in Somalia or people in the other side of the world that we don't know about and therefore we should not care about. Supporting one another, supporting young men and women who are being exploited by extremist organizations and empowering them to feel confident to reject violence is my goal. I didn't have anyone to empower me when I was faced with Islamophobia, racism, and sexism. I had to empower myself. But that doesn't mean I can't empower my own peers. It doesn't mean that I have to wait for a marble bust to be erected in my name to then be able to say, do you know what, I changed the world. I can try, and it's that trying that is more conviction, that has more conviction, and it's that trying that has more power than sometimes the actual final end product itself. And so my activism has seen me lead peace-building missions across the world, including Europe, Africa, and Latin America, because I refuse to stand there and wait for someone to make peace happen. I want to take it into my own hands. However, it's not enough to simply react to extremism. We need to proactively combat this pervasive threat with a positive alternative. Countering violent extremism is a full-time job. It takes courageous leadership, not from the upper echelons of society, but from the roots of every community. That is why I work in the local and grassroots context, empowering other people and equipping them with the tools to educate against hate, violence, and extremism. By supporting people who have been at risk of violent extremism or themselves considered perpetrating extreme violence, I have a unique opportunity to deconstruct the silos that exist among different groups of people. Much like Mandela deconstructed the silos of race and brought together an entire nation of people, I have a vision to bring together different faiths, different communities, and have a very, very difficult conversation. There is nothing more rewarding than helping to bring someone back from the grips of terror. And often it's a small act of understanding, empathy, and sympathy that can go a very, very long way in a person's story, in a person's journey that we know nothing about. Throughout all of my work, I've had one guiding vision, and that is to instill peace in my society. Changing the world in the grand sense never really occurred to me, and so I'm what some might call an accidental change maker. I was really only an angsty teenager with all this pent-up frustration and nowhere to channel it. So I could either have gotten very, very angry and given in to those extremist voices, much like my own peers who I've seen become radicalized, or I could do something about it. Being pulled in two directions is incredibly difficult. We've talked about identity. We've talked about being this hybrid Brit, Bengali, Muslim. My gosh, who am I, right? And everybody telling you, you are not this because you are that. It's really, really difficult growing up in the age of identity politics, choosing your own path. But luckily, I had strong groundings, strong rootings, a good core, a good community, and a good family to tell me you can be whoever you want to be. And so those statistics that wanted to relegate me to failure should not apply to me. It's not because I'm particularly gifted or spectacular, but because there is a crisis of leadership in our world. Mandela-style leadership. Frankly, the leaders of the world aren't doing enough to forego the threats we face. And it's up to us as individuals, everyday people, to take back control and lead from within. Because this is our problem, and this is our fight. Just as Mandela strove to shatter apartheid, one small step at a time, and we talk about it in his long walk to freedom, I strive to defeat violent extremism with small yet powerful acts of solidarity. There are 7 billion people on this planet. That's 7 billion visions and 7 billion different ways to enact change. So, if, like me, you're tired of being called a statistic, and you are tired of being called a failure, then you have the right to change the world. I'm giving you that right. I decided long ago that I wouldn't let societal class define me, and that I wouldn't let terrorists hijack my identity or define my future and where I'm going to end up. Instead, I decided that my race, culture, and creed would become my biggest enablers. And I went on to reclaim what was taken from me. My Muslim heritage, my Bengali heritage, my British heritage, that actually is mine as much as it is any white supremacist or any white extremist or any white person, for example, or anyone of any culture or of any color. It is all ours because our histories are shared. I come from a country that fought for independence against Pakistani extremism. I come from a region in which empirical rule of Britain had affected my own ancestors. And so I am as much British as anyone else because our struggles were shared. We shared in that fight to liberate one another. And so what I really want to do is leave you with the last part of this quote. Action can change the world. The power of the everyday person is and has been a missed opportunity. We emphasize the importance of communities in countering violent extremism, yet we don't empower our communities to do this. We don't empower them to take action. We tell them, you have the right to take action. You should take action. But we don't tell them that you are able to take that action. And so tonight, I want to activate the agency that lies dormant within you all. Tonight, I ask you to leverage yourself, and in doing so, leverage 7 billion other people to effect tangible change and shake the very foundations of our world. Because if one man can shake the foundations of the world, 7 billion people can make it crumble. As a former Nobel Peace Laureate once said, if one voice can change a room, then it can change a city. If it can change a city, it can change a state. And if it can change a state, it can change a nation. And if it can change a nation, it can change the world. Your voice can change the world. I firmly believe that the hope of this world rests on the shoulders of the young. To come together, united by common cause, united in common vision, and take action together. And as I reflect on this evening's comments, I'm brought to think about the late MP Joe Cox, who was taken from us by a terrorist. Let's face it, doesn't matter what his skin color was. Oh, he's white, he's got mental health problems. Oh, he's brown, he's definitely a terrorist. I'm sorry, that doesn't sit well with me. If you're a terrorist, you're a terrorist. And so the memory of Jo and her words were, we are far more united and have far more in common with each other than things that divide us. Similar to what Mandela said. And for me, it's about realizing this, because even though our stories are singular, and even though you and I are just statistics to one another, our destiny is shared. So ladies and gentlemen, I'll finish off as I started, and I'll tell you this once again. Action without vision is only passing time. Vision without action is merely daydreaming. But our vision and our collective action can change this world. Thank you very much.